Music theory using Microsoft Excel. Scale degree conversion to an absolute mode numbering system. In other words, how can we communicate between the two systems, bridging to the more sophisticated mode numbering system from the stupid system? You know, the scale degree thing. I'm just kidding. That's going to be the objective here. So get ready and some coffee, because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you've rocked with Excel. And that's what we're doing here, rocking with Microsoft Excel. Here we are in Excel. If you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay, because we'll basically build this from a blank worksheet. But if you do have access, 4 tabs down below: fretboard, example, practice blank. Fretboard tab having a simulated fretboard that we will refer back to. The example tab has the finished product, in essence the answer key. The practice tab has pre-formatted cells so you can practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that's okay, because we'll be working in the blank tab, basically building from scratch with a blank worksheet, practicing both our Excel skills and music skills at the same time, remembering they are basically one and the same, however, because you got to memorize tables, visualize tables. Best way to do that, practice them. If not with paper and pencil, even better with Excel. Let's go to the fretboard to get an idea of what we will be doing. Have the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling, on top, remembering our analogy that the fretboard is like a map of the territory, where we have only 7, not 12 destination locations. There are 12 actual locations, but we imagine the non-destination locations kind of like the oceans in the earth. We go through them to get to the destination locations, of which for our fretboard there are only 7 of them. Noting that if we then take a perspective from space, watching our world fretboard rotate around, we're imagining there are 12 different viewpoints that we can see from space. We need to name the viewpoint that we're looking at from space so that I can properly see where America is versus where Europe is, and so on and so forth. That's analogous to naming the 12 different keys, of which we will have collection of 7 destination points. So if I say, hey, look, I'm looking at it from the viewpoint of the key of C, now I'm listing out the 7 notes, the collection of notes from that viewpoint. Once I've defined that, I no longer want to define each of the locations as the perspective point of C. I want to say, no, that's Europe from the perspective of the key of C. In our case, we're going to call that the modal node numbers that don't change. That's the Ionian mode number 1. This is still the Phrygian mode number 3, and so on and so forth. Once we have the collection of notes, and we have the 7 notes within our collection, we have to decide where we want to spend most of our time on the map. That's what we're going to call our tonic, our modal center. So if it happens to be the C, that's like in Europe, for example, we're going to spend our time there and keep going back to Europe and then visit other places from it. That's basically our home. Then that doesn't mean that I want to renumber the system. I'm still going to call it Europe. Now, if I then say, okay, then I want to spend my time over here, let's say it's America, and now I'm vacationing over there, that's my normal center point at that point in time. I don't want to rename it to call it Europe, to call it my home, to call it number 1. No, it's still the same point within the map, within the 7 destination points. That's the key. That's what we want to keep in mind. And the scale system that we use typically doesn't do that. So if I say this is now my destination point, it's going to say that we're now in a different scale degree, which is going to be a G, right? It's going to be like a G Mixolydian scale, and they're going to call it the 1. But I would like to say, no, it's going to still be the 5 from an absolute modal system. Why are you renaming the map? Okay, so I think it's clear that not renaming the map is the easiest thing to do from just the proper perspective of the map. But when you're communicating to someone who keeps renaming all the points on the map, we have a communication problem. Now, there's going to be 2 communication problems we have. That's going to be, well, I need to know, if you tell me that it's like a G that I'm playing in Mixolydian, what is the collection of notes? So if I say I'm playing in Mixolydian, I need to know the collection of notes, which we usually label by the major collection of notes, meaning if I'm in space, I'm usually going to name my perspective based on the 12 major keys and then pick the tonic, the center point within those 7 collection of notes that I made from the 12 keys, right? So that means I have to figure out what the related major is typically so I can most easily visualize the 7 notes. And then we're going to have a numbering problem. So if you rename this as the 1, and then you tell me what chords we're going to play or the notes we're playing from that perspective as the 1 from a scale degree, I've got to convert it then to the idea of an unchanging. I'm not going to call Europe America all of a sudden and America Europe just because now I happen to be spending more time in America versus Europe or whatever, right? So I have this conversion issue. So let's go to the example tab. I'll show you. We're going to build this again. We'll build our table that we have seen before, and then we'll just say, okay, if someone says they're in D Dorian, then how can I figure out what collection of notes it is? Because the D Dorian starts on the second note. See, it would be more specific from our analogy in space to say, hey, look, the collection of notes is 4, meaning it's the C, 7 notes related to the perspective of the C, and the modal center that we're focused on is destination 2, the Dorian. That's where we spend most of our time. But that's not what most people do. They're just going to say, I'm in A minor or something like that. So what they should say is I'm not in A minor. No, you're looking at the perspective of the C collection of 7 notes, and your focal point is the A minor, right? That would be a more specific, but no one really does that. So when someone just tells you, I'm in A minor, you're going to have to think, okay, to get a proper perspective, I need to figure out what the proper major is so that I can know all the collection of notes. There's 3 ways we can do that mainly. One is I can know it just on the fretboard. So if they tell me I'm in A minor, I happen to know shape-wise that the related major is here because I know this shape. I would call it shape number 1, the rock and roll kind of shape. So I can kind of figure it out that way. Or we can know it by the formula, whole, half, and so on, because I know this is the 6th part of the formula. So I'm going from the 6 to the 7 to the 1. I can continue counting up the whole, half from A at this point. And then the third way I can do it is by what we call I would call it distance. And traditionally that would be intervals. So most people know their intervals best from the related major, which is a little difficult because that's the thing you don't know, right? But I want to know if I'm going to the C. I mean, if I'm on the A, how can I get to the C? Well, if I know the distance from the major to the Aeolian, the 6th, which is a 9 note away, then I can basically count that out, right? So I would call that, from my terminology, I would call that a modal range, right? What's the distance from A to C? What's the modal range out? And what's the number of half steps, or what's the interval? So those are the 3 ways you can kind of figure that out. No matter what system you do, you're going to have to do that. Even if you're using a scale degree system, they tell you you're in A minor, you might not know the collection of notes because you've based the collection of notes based on the related major. That's what everybody does. So that means you're going to want to find the related major oftentimes so you can orient yourself to the proper set of notes. All right, so that's what we'll do here. We'll just go through some scenarios and say, okay, how could we figure that out? So let's go to the blank tab and do it. Okay, I'm going to map this out a little bit more quickly because we've seen it before. So I'm going to select the whole triangle, right-click, and we're going to say Format the Cells. And I want to go to Underline Formatting Currency. We'll keep it, let's do negative numbers bracketed, and then $, no decimals. Okay, we'll list out our notes like we always do to start off with. I'm going to say this is going to be, let's bring it up here. I'm going to say this is going to be the number, and this is going to be the, let me select the whole thing again and make it bold. You might not need to do that, but I think it's better for presentation. And let's just say letter, that's going to be the letter. And then I'm going to say number and the letter. I'm trying to make it as small as possible, skinny as possible. Let's bring these down here. I'm going to make this black, white for my header, black and white. So we'll just list our notes. There's 1, 2. It goes down to 12 notes, down to 12. And then our notes are going to be A. I'll make it capital A. Can't do it. Capital A, and then A, B, and then B, and then C, and then C, D, and then D, and then D, E, and then E, and then F, and then F, F, G, and then G, and then G, A, right? And then I'm going to combine them together. This is going to be equal to I'm going to say A and the 1. Boom. And I'll copy that down. So we have now we have the letter and the number, and then we'll copy that. And then I want to repeat it 2 times. So I'm going to say this equals the 1 above it, or the 1. And I'll copy that across. And then I'm going to copy this down. I know I'm doing this really fast, but we've done this on all of our practice problems before. So I just want to repeat it just so we get a little bit of practice making this table that we've seen multiple times. Going to go up top. Font group, let's make this bordered, and we'll make it blue. If you don't have that blue, it's in the more colors. Standard, there's the blue. Boom. And then down here, we'll make it green. So we'll select these, bordered, dropping it down. I'm going to make it that green. And then I'm going to select these up top, double click somewhere in the middle, making them as skinny as possible. We can also center them, home tab, alignment, and center. Let's make this smaller. All right, then I'm going to make our nice little table that we've seen in Essence before with our modes, so we can list everything out. So I'm going to say this is going to be our mode, and we have the Ionian. So we have the Ionian. We've got the Dorian. We've got the Phrygian. We've got the Lydian, the Mixolydian, the Aeolian, the Locrian. That's going to be our modes. And then we've got the mode number. Mode number. So these are going to be the absolute numbers. I'm going to make this black and white up top. Black and white. So I'm going to keep them all the time as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't want to rename the modes. Those are the locations. That's like America. That's like the non-ocean. Those are the 7 continents of our fretboard, right? So we don't want to change the continent names, okay? Just because the world spins around. As the world turns, we don't need to change the continent names. You can spend your other time doing whatever they do as the world turns. I'm not sure you want to do whatever they're doing either, but this is going to be Roman. We'll make this equal to Roman tab, Roman numeral 1. So I'm going to copy that down. So this gives us our Roman numeral, which allows us to see if it's a major or minor mode. I'm going to double click on the ones that are minor, making them lowercase by saying lower tab, boom, boom. And then adding a lower tab, boom, boom. And then this one I'm going to add a lower tab, boom, boom. And this one I want a lower and a dot because it has a minor third and a diminished. So I'm going to say at the end, I'm going to close this up and say, and give me a quote for text and a dot. So that's what I'm going to call the diminished. All right, and then we've got the formula. I'll just say form with a U, maybe form U, to try to make it smaller. So we call it a whole, half, whole, half. Now the way I still say it that way, but I think the best way we should say it is in the steps of notes, which means our baseline step is 1 note away. So it's going to be a whole step is 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. That would be a better way to say it, because then you can use simple math in your mind, knowing that it's 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. Anyway, let's go. Let's make this centered, black and white. I'm going to select these, double click, skinny as possible, making it blue and bordered and blue. Okay, let's get to the new stuff. So I'm going to select this one, this D to make a skinny, format paint it to make a skinny J. All right, so let's imagine that we're in the Dorian. So Dorian. So someone says, hey, we're in Dorian D. Now I'm going to make these all related to the major key because I think that's the easiest thing to do, so that you can more easily start to visualize that relationship. But then once you have the concept, you can apply it to any key, right? So that's just the general practice oftentimes. So then I'm going to try to say this, I want to find the number. So if I say it's the D, I'm going to use a fancy XLOOKUP, and say, what's the related note number? Well, let's find the D over here in this column, and then comma, and then return the related number. So if I number A1 and then go up to 12, then the D is, hold on a second. I didn't pick the D. Let me try it again. What I want to do is find this D, comma, in this set, in that range, comma, return the number. And boom. So now I'm going to make the range is absolute, so I can copy this later. So I'm going to say F4, $ before the letter and number, $ before the letter and number, F4, $ before the letter and number, $ before the letter and number, F4, enter. All right, so then I'm going to say this is going to be the mode number, say the mode number, and we're going to say, I'm going to bring this down to the 9. So I'm on row 9. So you'll see why in a second. But I'm going to say it's on row number 9, and I'm going to say it's mode number 2. Now, so if someone says it's the Dorian, right, we're going to play in Dorian. Now, Dorian is a little less common because normally you would say that you're in major or minor, the two most common keys. But let's start with Dorian. So someone says they're in basically the D Dorian. So that means I know that I'm in mode number 2. I don't know the collection of notes is the problem. Because right now, because it's D, you might know the related collection of notes, but I'm going to use this one as the example. We know the collection of notes is going to be for the C major, but I need to get back to the major in order to know the collection of notes, the 7 notes in the collection. So I know this is the second of whatever collection of notes that I'm looking at. See? Now, most people are going to say, well, what you can do is you could just say, well, it just goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So if you're on the D, the one before it, the C must be the prior one because it's the second one. But you can't really do that because there's going to be sharps and flats involved. There's actually 12 notes. There's not really only the letters of the alphabet. So you'll be within a sharp or a flat if you do it that way. So that's not really the efficient way to do it. You want to apply either the formula, you want to know it in the system. So I could go over here and say, okay, well, if I'm on a D, then I can see in my shape that if I go back shape-wise, there's that note. And if I know on the fretboard that that's a C, that's one way I can do it, right? So I can kind of do it visually that way. I can see, okay, yeah, it's one back, and I can see that it's going to be a C. So I'm going to put up here, let's say this is the note number. And so I'm going to say the note number over here is number 6. That's going to be useful for simple math. I'm going to convert it once again, saying this is going to be the XLOOKUP. So XLOOKUP, I'm going to find that 6. I'm going to find it over here in my set of notes. And then comma, I'm going to be returning then the letter. And so that's the D we start on. Double clicking on this. Once again, I'm going to make this absolute. F4, 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 F4. So these two stay the same, static as I copy it down. So there's going to be that. So there's our D. So I could say, well, I know that if I go back to, then it would work, right? Because I'm on the second. So if I know my formula, if I'm going from the 1 to the 2, it would be whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And if I'm on this one, that means I got to go back a half. So that's one way I can do it. So I could say, okay, well then this 6 minus 2 would get me to a 4. A 4, if I copy this up, would convert to the C, right? So a 4 is a C. Notice the simple math is nice to have. It'd be nice to do this not in letters with the sharps and flats. Again, people will say, well, you could do it easier if you've memorized all the sharps and flats around the circle and so on and so forth. And again, if you're on a piano, I get it because the sharps and flats are all the black notes and you want to count them and whatnot. But if you're on a guitar or most other instruments, then that even on the piano, I don't think that's the most efficient way to do it, right? It'd be a lot easier to say, well, that's the 6th note. I'm just going to subtract 2 to get back to 4, right? That's how you'd kind of envision it. So you can envision it on your instrument, in my case, the guitar, shape-wise. You can envision it with simple math using the formula. So, but a lot of people will do it going forward because they can't really do sometimes you can't do the formula going back because I memorized it whole, half, whole, half. So meaning how far forward would I have to go in the formula? I'd start here and I'd go to here. I don't need to remember the new formula. I could just say, well, if I start here, then I need to go up from there. So for example, if I'm going to say that this is going to be the mode numbers. Now, if this is the second mode, I know the next mode is going to be a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it goes back to 1. I want to get to this 1. That's going to be the major key. So if I'm on the 2, I want to get back to the 1. What's going to be my formula? Well, the formula is going to be, let's put the formula here. Formula is going to be equal to that. There's the 2, and if I copy that down, it goes to the endpoint, and then I got to go one more to get all the way around. Let's actually repeat this. I'm going to say this equals the one above it. I'm going to copy that across this way and then copy it down a little too far so I can then back it off. So I'm going to then format paint this to here. What am I formatting paint? Just delete that. And then I'll make this green border and I'll make this one green. Okay, so now I can copy this down because that formula is going to keep repeating. So it repeats, right? So now I'm going the second whole step, and then so it's 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. That's going to be 10. That's going to get me back to the 1, not including this last 2. So notice if I'm on this 6 and I'm applying the formula, I go 6 plus 2 is going to get me to 8. Let's copy this down. This is going to be, this equals this plus this. That's my running balance. So 6 plus 1, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. I just said that's the wrong one. It's this plus this. And then that's going to give me our running balance. So there it is. Now notice that I don't want my letters to go higher. I don't want my numbers to go higher than 12. So this one went from 12, 13. 13 minus 12 gives me a 1, and then the 3, and then to the 4. So if I apply it this way, I'm going to say, okay, if I don't know, but I know my formula, I'm going to say, well, the formula starts here, goes 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1 should take me back home because that last half step always goes back home. I don't need this added 2 down at the bottom, right? So that's going to be, if I count that out, how many half steps is that? That's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So that's going to be the distance. Now you can also see that in intervals. So let me copy this down. So most people know they might know the distance. This would be what I would call the modal range. What's the modal range from a DC modal range, or in other words, a modal range of Dorian-Ionian, a Dorian-Ionian modal range, or you can think of it in how many half steps or the interval, right? So most people know the interval from the C going this way, possibly, which you would say it's a 9-note away major 6. So if you know it's a 9-note away major 6, then you could do the math from, you could say it's a 9-note away major 6 would be 6 plus 9 minus 12, or you can basically count it out. It goes around in a circle. So I know I kind of didn't say that possibly as best I could. We'll repeat the process again next time. But let's copy this over so I can make it a little bit, I can make it transferable. So what I'd like to do here is say these are my mode numbers. So I want them to go up by 1 until they hit 7, because there's only 7 of them, and then go back to 1. So let me do that with a formula. How can I do that? I can say, well, this is going to be equal an if logic. I'm going to say this plus 1. I want you to do that. If that is less than 8, if it's less than 8, because there's only 7 modes, then do that. And then I'm going to say plus, comma, that's what you want to do. So that, if it's less than 8, do that. But if not, comma, do that minus 7. And that'll take us around in a circle. So let's close that out. And then, so I'm going to copy that down. So you can say it does it. We're going to say, okay, this is going to go from mode 2, Dorian, to mode 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then not to 8 because there's only 7, back to 1. All right, that makes sense. What about the formula? The formula looks good. And then over here, I want to say that this is equaling my 6. So this is my center point. Let's make this a different color. Let's make it like orange, because that's my center point. And then below it, I'm going to say this plus this, but I don't want it to go above 12. So let me see if I can do this again and say, I'm going to say this equals this, my note D, plus the formula here, but I don't want it to go, this is not an equal, that's a negative. This equals, but I don't want to go over 12. So if that plus that is less than 13, meaning it could include 12, then, comma, I'm going to copy this, then do that. But if not, meaning it goes over 12, then do that minus 12. So that'll take us around in a circle. I forgot the if logic. You have to have the if first. If this plus this is less than 13, then do that plus that. If not, still do that plus that minus 12. All right, let's copy that down. Okay, boom. Right? And so then, and now if I go above it, I could say, well, look, I could apply the formula going backwards. I would do the same thing. That would be the easiest thing to do formula-wise. It would be one negative step. Now the formula, I'm going to say the easiest way to do it is to say this is going to be negative of, let's just say negative of the Dorian down going up this way. So if we're on the Dorian and we're going backwards, then it's going to be this 2. That's going to be the 2. And then enter. Let's make it a negative 2. I'll make it a negative. So we're going backwards. And then I'll copy that up this way, right? So that's going to be the formula going up, and I only need to take one step back to get to that, to get to where I want to be. So then if I copy this all the way up going this way, then once again, I don't want it to go below 0. So I have to use an if logic. So I'm going to say, well, equals if tab, and then this, I'm going to say this plus this. It's actually going to be subtraction because that's a negative number. If that minus that or plus that is, if that is, let's say, greater than negative 1, has to be greater than negative 1, meaning it could be, no, it has to be greater than 0. Then I want you to do that plus that, but if not, do that plus that, and then we're going to add 12 because it goes around in a circle. I think I got that right. Let's copy that back and see if it makes sense. I'm going to copy this up. So it goes 11, right? C, B, A, G, E, F. So it goes around in a circle. So where's my destination? It's right here. So again, I know I did that like 3 different ways, and you're possibly going to be thinking, well, I do it with my instrument. No, I do it with the formula. No, I know my intervals or my modal ranges. It's best to be able to do it either way, right? It's best to be able to say I could do it any of the 3 ways. That's when you know you've kind of mastered it. So then I'm going to go, okay, so now I'm going to say, I'm going to bring these up, same logic. So I'm going to say if tab, this is my number. I want that then. If that minus 1 is greater than, that minus 1 has to be greater than 0, then do that. If not, do that plus 7. So once again, it goes around in a circle. So there's the 1. I'm going to copy that this time so I can paste just the formulas. All right, so we did a lot of computer stuff there, but so hopefully that makes sense to some degree. We're doing a little bit on the coding side. So this is going to be the note number. This is, we'll say that's just a note. All right, let's make this black, white. Let's center it. I'm going to make this whole thing bordered. Make it bordered. And then I'm going to make this blue and this blue. Okay, so what we basically did is say, okay, we're on Dorian, and I'm trying to find the different ways I can say, okay, what is the related major, which is going to help me determine the collection of notes. All right, I'm going to make this smaller, as small as I can, as tight as possible. And then let's do the same thing for the different modes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this over. I'm going to make this green so I can go side by side, and we'll go green and then blue. So let's copy this over here. Let's copy the skinny too, from J to N, so that we can make a skinny O at the same time. So there we have it. So now same formatting. So now I'm going to make this, though, this is the Phrygian. So Phrygian, I'm going to imagine we have the E, which I'm making it nice and convenient to list it all out to the relative of the key of C. So notice what happened in the formulas down here. I'm going to say this works, but I'm going to get rid of this color. I'm going to make this standard blue for our starting point. Standard blue. And then it's like, okay, what happened with this one up top? It's pulling from the wrong point. Okay, that makes sense. So I'm going to have to redo the formula. Let's just delete the formula. And then the note is going to be, that will populate once I get the formula right. All right, so now we're going to say, okay, what if someone says, let's make this one blue so we can say it's blue. So what if someone says, okay, now we're playing an E Phrygian. And I'm like, okay, oh no, E Phrygian, what's the collection of notes? I know the collection of notes named based off of the major scale. So I have to see, well, what's the major scale then? Well, the Phrygian, I know that that's going to be the 3rd degree. So I could go back 2 units. But the point is, I don't know the collection of notes. Now, if I did it by shape, I could do it. I can go over here and say, okay, well, if I'm on E and they're saying that's Phrygian, then I'd go 2 notes back within the shape that I know I'm in, the collection of notes. So it's always the same because I see my place as the 3, the Phrygian. Therefore, it's always going to be this steps back, right? Whole step back. Okay, so that's one way I can do it, visualizing it on my instrument. So then I can say, okay, then I'm in the key of C and related Phrygian, and I'm looking at then the 3rd node within the Phrygian. All right, the other way I can do it is say, well, I know the formula. If I know the formula, so it's going to be from the major, it's going to be whole to get me to the Phrygian. So, right, it would be going from the major whole step to the Dorian whole step to the Phrygian. Okay, so if I'm on Phrygian, it would be 2 whole steps back, which would be 2 plus 2 or 4. So I could say, well, I know it's going to be 8 minus 4, or if I did that stepwise, I could say it's going to be a -2 and then a -2. Let's do it this way. I'm going to say this is going to be negative. If I did it from down here, we'd say that we're going back from the C starting, wait, I'm over here, starting from here. So it's going to be, it would be starting from here and we're going back. Here I am. Here's the Phrygian, and let's go back up this way. Boom. So if I copy that up, I'm going to go do. Then that's going to take me from the 8 minus 2 whole step back brings me to the 6 minus 2 whole step back is going to bring me to the 4. That now is my major. So that's one way I can kind of see it. Let's bring it all the way up though. I'm going to bring it all the way up so you can see all the steps backwards if we went all the way. And then let's make this yellow. Or I could see it going forward and say, okay, how far forward would I have to go? Well, if I was on the major, it'd be a whole step to get to the Dorian, and then another whole step to get to the Phrygian, and then I'm starting on this half step. So I'd have to say, okay, I'd be starting on this half step, and I'd have to say, okay, it's going to be 1, 2, 2, 2, 1 to get me back, right? 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. And so why didn't this count out? So if this plus this is, now this is staggered wrong, sorry about that. This should be not here, and this should be coming from that note. So that's correct. So I'm on this one, which is an E. I'm sorry, I've been saying F the whole time, haven't I? Oh, man. All right, so this is going to be equal to, we're going to be starting on the Phrygian. Let's do that again. And I'm going to say, okay, we'll bring it all the way down. And then there it is. It's the one after this one. So it's going to be 1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. The 1/2 step is going to be 8 away, gets me to the C. So, and we can also, so then let's make this whole thing blue to start with. And then we'll make this the yellow. Okay. So there we have it. All right. So then, and then the other way we can see it is say, well, do I know my modal ranges, right? So what's the distance between what's the distance between the 2-7 modal range, right? Between the Phrygian and the, now wait a second. This should be the mode. This should be number, yeah, it's because this should be number 3, mode number 3, which brings this back to mode number 1. So 3, 2, 1, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to the 1. Okay, so what's the modal range from the Phrygian? A 3-1 modal range. Or from an interval perspective, most people would see it from the major. So what's the distance from the major to the Phrygian, right? So that would be, so the Phrygian is the third of the major, so you would think it would be a 4, it'd be a 4 note away, you know, major third if you thought about it that way. Which you can see here, this plus this is 4 notes away from the C to the E, right? And that means it has an inverse distance of 12 minus 4, which is going to give me the half steps down to here, which is going to be 8. All right, let's try to do this again, see if I can do it a little bit more cleaner. I know I'm kind of doing my Excel thing at the same time. Let's see it, and so it's kind of a little messy. So let's copy this over. Let's copy it with the skinny. Copy it with the skinny and go do it. And then I'm going to make this one, let's make this one green. So we'll do it every other one. And then let's make this one the Lydian. So Lydian. All right, so this is going to be an F Lydian, we'll say, right? And so that means that this should be now 4. This is going to be, let's do it this way, this plus 1, because we're always going 1 mode up. So that's our starting point. The formula, I'm going to delete the formula to start with. And then this G is coming from the wrong spot. That's not right. So it should be 9F. Okay, and then let's make this blue. This is blue, and then this is going to be blue. Okay, so now if someone says, okay, we're playing in F Lydian, F Lydian. Well, I know that Lydian is the fourth, right? So I could say, okay, how can I could go back from C, so it would be major, so it's always the fourth from 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can go back 1, 2, 3 back. So again, if I know my instrument, I could go over here and say, all right, well, where's the F? And then I could go back to the C. I know my shape. And I can say, okay, if I'm on the F, I'd be going 1, 2, 3. What happened? I'm on the back here. So I'd go back 1, 2, 3 steps, right? So that's one way I can do it, by knowing my instrument. So then I can also say, okay, well, what's the formula? So if I went back in terms of actual notes, it's like, okay, well, if I was on, here's my formula, and I'm on the Lydian now, right? To get to the Lydian, I had to go whole, whole, whole. So, I'm sorry, whole, whole, half, or 2, 2, 1. So then you would think that that would be a distance of 2, 2, 1, or 4, right? To get to the Lydian. It's 2 to get to the Dorian, 2 to get to the Phrygian, 1 to get to the Lydian. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's 5, right? 2, 2, 1 is 5. So that means it has a distance of 5 notes, and from an interval perspective, we would call that a 5-note away perfect fourth. We'll get to intervals later, but if you know the intervals, you can do it that way. If you know the formulas, we could say, okay, I'd have to go back then 5, right? So I can do it, so I can go over here and say, okay, well, the formula I'm going to say is, let's go negative, and let's find it down here. We're on the Lydian, and I'm going with the formula of that 2. I'm going back, I'm sorry, that 1, back 1, 2, 2 to get to Ionian. So that's going to give us 1 and 2, 2, which is a distance, a total distance, or an interval of 5 from this note here. So it's going to be from a number standpoint, F is number 9, minus 1 gets us to 8, an E, minus 2 gets us to 6, a D, minus 2 gets us to the 4, or 9 minus 5 is going to give us to 4, so the related is a C. All right, let's go. So, but what if I don't know going that way and I have to count up the other way, right? So if I know that the distance from the major to the Lydian is a 5-note away perfect fourth, the inverse, 12 minus 5, is going to be a 6-note away that I would have to go 12 minus 5 would be a 7-note away, going upwards, right? So let's count that out. We're going to say, all right, well, let's say that if I count up, I'm on the Lydian. So let's go, we're going to say from the Lydian. So here's the Lydian, and now I'm just going to go up from this point. So I'd have to say, okay, I'm going 2, 2, 1, and I'm starting on the 2, 2, 2, 1, which would get me back to the Ionian. So if I'm going up, it would be 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1. Let's go enter, and let's say copy, and I'm going to paste the formulas only. So now you've got 2, 2, 2. So it went 2, 2, 2, 1 gets us to the C. So here's the C that way. And then we can go back this way. And then there's our C up top. I can continue this pattern, however, up to the top. Okay. Let's try it again. Let's do another one. So now let's do it again. I'm going to copy from T to X, and we'll just practice and say, okay, what if someone says they're in Mixolydian? Mixolydian. And we're going to just imagine it's G to make it easy. So we already know the answer, kind of. I'll delete all this. And so now that's the 5. So G is mode number 5. Let's make this blue and blue to start off with. So okay, so now we're on a G, now I'm on mode number 5. They say I'm in Mixolydian, G Mixolydian. Okay, what's my collection of notes? Well, I want to find the related major. So Mixolydian is the 5th. So if it's the 5th, it might be easier to count forward now, right? Instead of going behind it, it might be easier to go forward because it goes around in a circle. So I got to go 5, 6, 7, 8, or 1. Here's the 1. So if I go forward from 5, that would possibly be the easiest thing to do. Now I can do that on my instrument. I could be like, okay, I'm over here. I want to get back to the 1. I know if that's the 5, it goes the next location that of the 7 locations is 6, 7, and then back to the 1. So I can see it visually that way. But if I'm trying to do it without looking at my instrument, I have to look at the half steps. I got to figure out the half steps and say, okay, well, this time it's possibly easier to me to count forward than to count backwards, right? So here's, the destination I want to get to. Let's do that first this time. Here's the yellow up here, or here's the yellow down here, right? So I could go up 1, 2, 3. So those would be modal half steps, but I want to look at modal half steps. I want to look at actual half steps, right? So I could count that way and then say, okay, what's my formula? This is going to be equal to counting up this time. So if this was my formula, it goes whole, half to get to Mixolydian. That half step gets me to Mixolydian. So then I'm going to go whole, half to get me back to the Ionian. So we're going to start on this 2 right there. I'm going to copy that so I don't mess up my formatting, and paste it down. Right? So then we're going to go from there, whole, half gets me to the C. So that's a distance of now measuring from G to C, the modal range of a 5, 1, or XI, Mixolydian to the Ionian, has a distance of 5 half steps, right? So to get there, or a 5 note away, which would be a 5 note away perfect 4th. Now you might know the distance from C there. What's the interval, or from the major to the Mixolydian? The 1 to the 5. What would be the 1 to the 5? That would be the 5 is going to be a 7 note away perfect 5th, right? So, and we can see that counting the other way. So then we could say, okay, let's do it this way. I'm going to go backwards. So now I'm on the Mixolydian here. And so now I'm going up. So I have to pick the one above it. So if I'm on Mixolydian, I'm going to subtract 2, 1, 2, 2. So enter. Let's do it. So we're going to say, let's copy that. And I'll paste it up here. Good. So now if we're, hold on a second. Que paso. Undo that. Something weird's happening. These need to be negative. Let's make this a negative. And then copy and paste the formula. So now if I'm going back, it's going to be 2, 1, 2, 2, right? Which is a total distance of 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2, which is 7. Is that what I said, right? 7 note away perfect 5th. All right. All right. So let's do 2 more. The next one's the most common one. So, which is going to be the minor or Aeolian. So let's make this blue. So I'm staggering back and forth. And then I'll make that dark blue. And then I'll go from the skinny Y to AC and paste it. So now let's do this one. Let's say this is the Aeolian. A-E-O-L-I-N. And let's just say that's an A to make it easy again. And then I'm going to delete all of this. This is now the 6. Okay, someone says they're in A minor or A Aeolian. Same thing, right? They're most likely going to say A minor. So they could say, okay, we're in A minor. Okay, cool. So what's my set of notes? Again, you possibly know that A is related to C, but if you don't know that, if it's some other, how would I know it? Well, I can look at my fretboard and I can say, well, A is the 6, right? So if I'm on here, it's the 6th of the related major, so I know I can go up 3 destination points on our map. So, I'm sorry, 2 destination, go up 2, 1, 2. So it goes up 2 destination points. There's the related major. So that's one way we could do it. But if I don't have that, I'm just trying to kind of memorize it. I could say, would it be easier to go forward, or would it be easier to go backwards? Clearly, it would be easier to go forwards around the circle because I'm closer. So if I'm on the 6, I want to go 6, 7, back to 1, right? Back to the 1. I'm on the Aeolian. The next one up is Locrian. The next location gets me back to the Ionian, which is the major key, which is the easiest one for me to kind of visualize what my set of notes are. What's my collection of notes? So that means I'm going to try to go forward most likely and say, all right, this is going to be A. Let's go to my formula. Is going to be from this point, right? The formula is 2, 2, 1, 2, 2. That gets me to the Aeolian. And then if I'm on Aeolian and I want to keep going forward, I start at 2, 1, and that gets me back home. So it's just going to be here, 2, and I'm going to copy that and paste it down here to do it, and paste the formulas. So it's going to be the 2, 1 gets me back home. In other words, it's 3 notes away. In other words, the distance of what I would call a modal range of a 6, 1, Aeolian, Ionian modal range, AI modal range, is going to be a distance of 3, right? Meaning it's also, you can also call that a 3-note away minor third, which we'll talk about intervals later. What if I was going from the 1 to the 6? What's the distance from the 1 to the 6? Well, that's going to be the 6, which will be a 9-note away. So you could say it's 12 minus 3. It's going to be, or it's going to be a 9-note away major 6. All right, so let's try to do that. If I count it backwards, then I'm going to say, all right, I'm on Aeolian right down here, and now I'm going back up, which is the one above it. So I'm going to go Aeolian, back 2 to Mixed Lydian, back 2 to Lydian, back 1 to Phrygian, back 2 to Dorian, back 2 to Ionian. Right? Let's do it. We'll go, okay. We'll copy that and paste it up top to do, paste the formulas. So now we're going back from 1, 12, 11, G, back 2 to 9, right, and then 8, and then to 6, and then to 4. So what's the distance? It's going to be 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2 plus 2, which is going to be 9. 9-note away from C to A, going that way. 9-note away, which you could say it's a major 6, or the modal range going from 1, 6 modal range, IA modal range, Ionian, to the Aeolian is a distance of the 9, right, 9. Okay, let's do one more. Let's do the Locrian, just to wrap it up. Copy from the skinny over. Let's make this one green. And so no one really plays in Locrian, but let's just finish our exercise. Locrian. So they're crazy. The band is like, dude, we're playing in Locrian. What? No one plays in Locrian. No one plays it, but we're doing something totally out of the box, man. So you got to know your Locrian. So we're going to say, okay, well, that's cool. That's easy, actually, because that's the 7. So am I going to count up, or am I going to count back? I'm possibly going to count up. Again, if I know my instrument, I'm just going to say, well, that's one modal destination. That's one continent up, one destination up. So if they're saying I'm on B, so I'm on a B, I'm just going to say, okay, that's not a B. Where's my B? B, where's my destination? Well, it's the next step up in my shape. It's going to be right there. All right. But if I'm over here and I'm just trying to figure it out, I've got to know my formula and say, what's my formula? Well, I need to go up. I want to go up 1. And what's my formula from Locrian? Well, I know my whole formula from Ionian to Dorian is a whole step, Dorian to Phrygian is a whole step, Phrygian to Lydian is a half step, and then Lydian to Mixolydian's a whole step, Mixolydian to Aeolian's a whole step, and then Aeolian to the Locrians, I'm sorry, a half step. I got messed up somewhere. And then Locrian to the Ionian is a half step. And so it's just a half step away is the point I was trying to get to. I messed it up, but there it is. So I'm just going to copy that. We just got to go a half step up. And so there it is. So now we go from note 3 up 1 to get to 4. What if I went backward? So I can also know my distance. So what would be the nodal range from destination, a 7-1 modal range, or a Ni, otherwise known as Locrian to Ionian modal range. It has a distance of 1, right? Or if I go the other way around, then if it's 1 half step going one way, it's got to be 11 going the other way, right? And so if I copy it up, so if I go the other way, I can think about the formula. What if I think about the formula going the other way from C? What's the 1 in a major, the 1 to the 7, or the 7th of a C major is going to be then an 11 note away, major 7. I can count that by formula by saying this is going to be equal to, and say, okay, if I'm all the way over here on Locrian, that's what I'm on. I'm going to go back by 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2. I think that's right. That gets me back to the Ionian. So let's check it. So we're going to say that'll be the 2. I'm going to paste that out. So right. So I went 2, 2. So 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2 for a full distance of 11. Okay. So I know that was a little bit wonky because I'm trying to do the formatting and think about it multiple different ways at the same time. And like I'd say, most people will do it one way or the other. They're going to say, I know my instrument. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to just see it on the instrument. I know the shape. Or they're going to say, I know my intervals, so I'm going to use my intervals. I know my modal ranges, or I know my formula, and so on. Or they're going to say, I only need to know major and minor because I don't play in any of the other modes or something. So if you find yourself saying any of those things, however, you're limiting yourself, right? You're saying, I'm just going to look at it from one perspective. I do that too. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, what you want to do is say, what I would like to do is be able to see it from as many perspectives as possible. And I realize I can't do that right now. So I need to practice looking at it from different perspectives because that'll open up other things, not just, so it's really useful to be able to see all of the distances between the destinations on the map and be able to define those distances as many different ways as possible means that you can hit all the rides in the Disneyland theme park better than anyone else can because you know how to navigate.